of the Regional Transportation Advisory Council, also known as the Advisory Council for Boston Region MPO. And this is going to be a special meeting because we're going to be part of the federal certification review process for the MPO. So normally we start off with a round of introductions where we just go around the table, around the screen, and introduce ourselves and our affiliations. But we're going to wait, and depending on the number of attendees, we may do that right after the presentation by Leah and or Cassandra. Otherwise, you may just introduce yourself whenever you ask a question or make a comment. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand this over to Leah Sermon of the Federal Transit Administration and Cassandra Strander, of the Federal Highway Administration, kick off the certification process, the recertification process for MPO. So whoever wants to go.
Yeah, Stella, did you have something you were going to cover?
Sure. Yeah, real quick, going to go through our little process here for our MPO meetings. So just running over a couple guidelines to get us started. First of all, to let everyone know, you are invited to participate in our transportation planning process, regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status, or background. You can read the full notice of your rights and protections at www.bostonmpo.org/MPO_non_discrimination. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, please contact me, Stella Jordan, the MPO staff at sjoRDAN@ctps.org or at 857-702-3675. A few short guidelines before we get started. You will probably have joined this meeting with a muted microphone. At this point, we'd ask that you please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. You may mute and unmute yourselves, but please do remain muted unless you're actively speaking. And to participate in the discussion, please select the raised hand function. You can find this by clicking either on the participants button at the bottom of the screen. A window will pop up with the raised hand button at the bottom, or you can access it via the reactions button in the toolbar. The chair will then call on participants. And if you're on the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. Again, if you're having any technical difficulties or require assistance, please contact me. You can do so via the chat box at sjordan@ctps.org or at 857-702-3675. And with that, we will skip over the introductions, as Len said, and go straight into the Federal Certification Review public meeting. So I'll hand it over to Leah and Cassie.
Thank you, Stella. So thank you and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Leah Sermon from the Federal Transit Administration. I'm here with my colleague Cassie Ostrander from Federal Highway Administration. And we just wanted to start this session with a short presentation to sort of set the stage as to what this review is all about, what we're looking at as part of this process. And then we'll open it up to spend most of this time hopefully hearing your input, your thoughts, and your feedback for us. So you can go to the first slide, please. So federal law requires that Federal Highways and Federal Transit review and certify the transportation planning process in every large urbanized area. That's those designated by the census as having a population over 200,000. So that certainly includes the Boston urbanized area. And we're required to do this review and certification process at least once every 4 years. Through this review, we're looking at compliance with federal transportation laws, such as the FAST Act, more recently, the bipartisan infrastructure law, and other related requirements. We also do use these reviews to look not just at compliance, but we look for best practices that we might be able to share nationally. We also look for areas that could use improvement. Maybe we could bring some technical assistance to assist folks and improve some processes, and just anything that we can, anywhere there's opportunities for improvement. So the last certification review within the Boston region was done in late 2018 and completed in 2019. So here we are almost 4 years later, going through this process again. Next slide. So as part of this, we're here to speak to you as members of the public and stakeholders about the transportation planning process as it is working here in the Boston region. We get public input on a lot of different things within the planning process. It could be things like the availability of draft planning documents, the opportunity for public to review and comment on those, how public input is considered within the decision-making process, general access and opportunity to participate, maybe something particular to technical assistance or project selection that you've seen or been part of. Just a few examples of things that you might provide comments on. Next slide. So again, we're taking comments here today. Hope to have a good discussion, and we'll also be taking comments, written comments, if you want to send anything to Cassie or I for the next 30 days. We're looking to get all the input together by mid-October. And whatever we hear, we'll be summarizing it and kind of using that to inform our final decision, which will be documented in a report at the end of this process. Next slide. So again, at the end of this process, we have a report and we make a certification determination. Our target will be about 90 days after the review. So again, taking input into October, about 90 days after that, we'll be hoping to wrap this up and make our determination, have the report to share. By federal law, we can have one of 3 determinations. If there are no compliance issues identified, then we can certify the process. If we do identify some compliance issues, we can certify the process subject to corrective actions, where we would identify what needs to be done in order to bring the process back into compliance. Or in a very, very extreme circumstance, it could be that the process would not be certified. If we identify compliance issues, our preference is to provide corrective actions so we can resolve it and move forward. Next slide. All right, so I'll turn it over to Cassie now.
Thank you, Leah. So again, good afternoon. I'm Cassie Ostrander with Federal Highway. So I'm going to just provide a very high-level overview of the Metropolitan Transportation Planning process. This may look familiar to you, and again, it's going to be pretty general. So this slide describes the how. The planning process should be carried out in a what we call 3C approach, meaning planning and programming documents are developed through a continuing, cooperative, and comprehensive process. The planning process is really a process by which transportation decisions are made, projects are planned, and then selected and prioritized for implementation within the region. Next slide, please. So this slide describes the why. Why is the transportation planning process important? The Metropolitan Transportation Planning process is important because it decides how federal dollars are spent within the Boston region. Because of limited funding, the MPO must prioritize the regional needs and determine the best and most economical solution. So those projects that best meet the goals and objectives and best public needs get selected. Next slide, please. So who is involved in the Metropolitan Transportation Planning process? You all are. Listed here are some of the major stakeholders, the NPO, the policy committee, the RTAC, the technical committees, providers of public transportation. We listed here MBTA, also Metro West, CADA, local elected officials, federal highway and federal transit, of course, the public and other stakeholders as well. Next slide, please. So this slide really kind of sums up the 4 key MPO planning documents. These are all required as part of the process. And these are the products of the transportation planning process. Real quick, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan or Regional Transportation Plan, that is the 20-year multimodal plan that describes the regional needs, priorities, potential solutions in the region. And I know Boston's in the process for updating that for next year. The TIP, the Transportation Improvement Program, that is a 4-year list, or in Massachusetts, 5 years list of financially feasible projects. And it provides a document where it prioritizes those regional projects for funding and implementation. The UPWP is the Unified Planning Work Program. That's kind of the plan for planning. It is a document that describes the planning activities to be completed with a budget and a schedule. And kind of at the heart of all of these documents is the Public Participation Plan, or in Boston, the Public Engagement Plan, which is a large component that feeds into all these plans. So next slide, please. So again, that was a very high level overview of why we're here, why you're here, and the process and key documents in general. So we want to hear from you. At this point, we will open it up for anyone to provide comments and input on the transportation planning process in the Boston region. I see that a lot of folks have put their name and affiliation, which we appreciate. But if you are making a comment, if right before your comment, if you could just introduce yourself, if you're speaking for the first time, that would be great. And again, we'll be accepting comments till October 14th. At the end of the presentation, we do have our contact information as well. And I believe this presentation was shared, so you can send us mail or email if you'd prefer to kind of share your comment that way instead of verbally today. So again, we turn it over to you. We look forward to hearing your comments.
Thank you, Sandra. So Stella, I'm going to ask you to drop the presentation and then give us so we can have a gallery view, everybody. It'll still be great for you to raise your hands electronically, so because that helps determine the order in which you've requested to speak to me, but at least this way, to the extent people want to be visible, we can see who is visible. And so let's engage with our guests. So normally at an MPO meeting with much of a gap in talking, I raise my hand, but I'm chairing, so I'm going to hold back.
We do have some questions that we did come up with to spur conversation. If that would be preferred, that is in the presentation as well, kind of as a placeholder slide. We could go there, Len, if we want to share the screen.
Yeah. Why don't we? Because I really do want to hold back, partly because I really want other people to speak, but also because, well, given the role that I'm now playing, in the PO as the chair of the advisory council, I kind of feel that the comments are things that I should listen to more rather than say how I think things are. So Steve.
Yeah. So in the past, you've met with the members of the MPO and had a various agenda, and it's like several days that would occur. Is that going to happen again?
Are you talking about the onsite itself or the coming to the MPO for public input, the policy meeting?
You know, you would come and meet with the MPO, and you had a particular agenda that you went down various aspects of how the MPO was organized and review some of the problems and how things are going at all different levels. And that would take, I think about, as I recall, be like 3 different days that would, and you know, maybe 3 afternoons or maybe even 3 whole days that you did that. Is that same thing going to be scheduled this time?
Yes, so we are meeting on September 28th and 29th. We're doing a day and a half with CTPS staff, and MPO members are invited to attend. So that will be kind of where we have specific topics, and the federal team will be asking questions and hearing responses. We also will be attending the October 4th or 5th MPO policy board meeting and giving kind of the same presentation and asking for public input. We'll also, after we have our onsite at the end of September and do our report and come up with our findings, we'll be coming back to the MPO policy board and reporting out on what our findings were, and kind of saying, you know, here's what we found, recommendations, commendations, corrective actions. So kind of reporting out that way as well.
Okay, so could you either repeat or send out, you know, those dates and times and where and all that? Are you going to send that out to everyone shortly?
Yeah, I can do that.
I believe MPO staff is also going to be publicizing that, Steve.
Okay, good. All right. That was my question.
Okay, Steve. All right, Anna Christina? And if you can just say with what organization you're affiliated, that'd be great.
So I'm with the Boston Society of Civil Engineers, and I was out in the field, so I have head hair. Please ignore my appearance. But I noticed that you were saying, are there perspective views you feel are missing from the process? And I'm not sure if this is what you meant, but I'm still pushing to see a sustainability requirement to new projects coming up. And I know that's on the ICAA as well. So I'm wondering, if you're seeing that, are people responding to it, or is there any way you can publicize that you prefer projects to have a portion? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I can hear you. I think we can all hear you. You know, I think it's more so that folks are listening, but you know, but Cassandra or Leah?
Leah, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I think I missed maybe the end of it. So I think what I heard, so in terms of perspectives that might be missing, it sounded like your comment was that sustainability maybe wasn't being, or could be further incorporated into project selection. Is that?
Yes, sustainability and resiliency measures being noted and, you know, being rewarded.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna Christina. Franny?
At the risk of exposing my naivete, I'm just going to sort of look at these questions and just sort of say things that come to my mind, and I apologize if I should know some of these answers. I think the thing that hasn't been clear to me as a resident who's been involved and not a planner, I represent my town. Sometimes I've represented my planning region, but I'm not a trained planner, was where this process ends and the rest of the state begins, and like how state funding versus federal funding comes into play, sort of the whole big picture. So when I'm thinking about the MPO planning process, and that's what we're talking about, like the TIP and all the MPO right here. So that if the second question, how I understand how it works, that's always been a little bit unclear. Like, how does the planning for the rest of the state, the other MPOs come in? And how does the non-federal funding planning come in? And always part of that was, where does, if this is federal funding, how does a big project that really is a federal project, such as the North-South Rail Link, fit in? Because I never see it being incorporated into discussion and planning at the MPO level. So those are things that sometimes aren't clear. I feel like it's been a really great effort over the last 2 or 3 years to really try to make it equitable and try to bring equity into the decision-making process, and that seems really great.
Can I
And-
ask,
Yeah,
just on that point on equity, can you give a couple of examples where you think it's been effective?
oh, that, I just remember visits to meetings, my mind's going blank as to her name, but who works on it.
Betsy Harvey.
Yes, Betsy. Both coming to our community in person before the pandemic and also coming to this group and just really trying to look at where we might not be reaching equity and really answering our questions. I felt like that group was available to really hear concerns on our part and was trying to make it equitable. It all gets very confusing. I think one place where things are confusing is where you look at something as to what neighborhood it's in, as to what, if it brings equity. But if the thing, like, let's say a bridge right next to a neighborhood, which has a lot of vulnerable populations in it, but the bridge is helping out other people, but you just said, oh, because it's right here, then this is, adding equity, that kind of confusion. I think they were looking at, or at least I heard them acknowledging questions about that. I don't know how the outcome came. One thing over time that I've noticed is that if you're in the room, I learned this early on, if you're in the room when decisions are being made, it makes a difference. And that always bothered me a little bit. I mean, it's human nature, but if there's a community that's trying to get some funding for something, but they don't have staff to send to Boston, as it was at that time, to attend the meeting, or a resident, as it was in my case. I don't know how to avoid it, but it helps when you're in the room. And so I think equity-wise, attention has to be paid to that. Not depending on the sort of personal attentions to consider projects more. And finally, the question about a virtual environment. I think it's been, sorry, it's my stove. Wait, let me just turn it off. I think it's really helped make it easy to attend. Oh my God. Attend, train or even parking, that crazy lot that's right near the transportation building. I'll never go into that one again with the really steep ramps. I think it's really helped and made it easier to be able to attend meetings online. And I see, it looks like the numbers are bigger, but I'm not sure actually lately. Early on in the pandemic, it seemed like they were. So the convenience of it is very good, but I think we do need some face-to-face. When I've had very few face-to-face recently, it was really invigorating, and you make connections in ways that you don't in this environment. So I go both ways. Okay, so that's just my first stab at those answers.
And Fran, you want to say your affiliation?
Yeah, well, so I'm a resident in Acton. I have a lot of different hats. I'm on the Lowell Regional Transit Authority Board. I guess that would be a weakness in this, the whole line between MBTA and RTAs. regional rail versus more core transportation. There's a lot of things that I'm not sure are solved. And I'm also now the transportation specialist on the League of Women Voters, the statewide legal action committee, and in various regional groups, like our planning group. So is that enough for my affiliation?
Oh, well, yeah, that's very, I didn't know that last part, so I'm glad we asked. So cool.
Yes,
Very nice,
yeah.
Franny.
Lots
And,
of hats, lots of colleagues, no job.
well, thank you, Franny, for all the comments. And
Thank you.
so, John McQueen.
Hi there.
Boston.
Walk Boston, John McQueen. Thank you for coming. This is a good presentation, a reacquainting of with the 3 Cs. I'm just going to take up the tip, and I think that in the last 2 or 3 years, Matt Genova did an outstanding job, and he left the agency, and but he was remarkable in terms of helping to coach some of the line item participants to move them along a little bit, or to give them some advice on some aspects that they could, fill in the blanks better to accomplish, reaching their goals of receiving funding. And he is very helpful and very, very much on top of it, very willing to speak with all the participants in that. One item that we, as a council, asked for a couple times in the last couple of years has been to get a measurement on the TIP programs and a recap, let's say, of their delivery, or post-mortem of their effectiveness and their efficiency. It's one thing to get them fully funded and to have them in progress for delivery of the project. But where did that all end up? Were we successful, really, technically? Or were there things that we learned along the way that can be incorporated either in the TIP process in the future, or possibly even in the LRTP, as it's formed? That's an aspect that I think would help strengthen the whole TIP and funding process, is getting that kind of post-mortem learning. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Can I just ask a quick follow-up on that, the postmortem? You're talking about individual projects or more programmatic level? You're muted.
There I am. Really both. I mean, there's some individual projects that are substantial, and they will vary in terms of their delivery. It could be a rail trail, it could be some intersection or some complete streets programs that might uncover some difficulties along the way that weren't designed in, or whatever. But there's learning to be had from programmatic as well as individuals, and so I think both. I mean, it's obviously more work, but I think it's all worth it. It's sort of a full circle of the evaluation and planning process, really, is the measurement and then going back in and then replanning. So.
Okay. I mean, there we go, David. I was about to say, but normally a very talkative bunch. I mean, being a little shy, but now Dave's popped in. So thanks, Dave.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. My comment isn't really any implied criticism, just kind of an observation, and maybe kind of an epiphany of sorts that I feel like I came to in my own head in the last year. which is that I think I'm sorry to those of the others of you from the council who've heard me say this before, but I'm going to say it again. I think that one of the vital functions that the MPO can play better than it does is to spur regional cooperation when it comes to planning. So what we've got is a system where the different town players come, and I'm just, by the way, a citizen representative of my town, Needham. But we come to the table like a lot of towns, hoping to get funding for our pet projects that we wouldn't otherwise be able to pull off ourselves. And sometimes those are with a 5-year lookout, sometimes it's with a 30-year lookout. But what it's not, I think, frequently enough is how can we figure out a way to conceive of these projects with our neighboring towns, approaching the MPO and other state funding sources with a sort of a collective approach, which will fundamentally, it's not just let's all have nice politics and be friendly neighbors, but we will achieve economies of scale if we are making the project bigger. And I don't think the existing system incentivizes us to do that as much as it should. And if the federal players that ultimately are doling out the money could build that more into the process, whereby you get a higher ranking or you get some more additional funds thrown into the mix when you show that you are cooperating at that level. I think that's key, because what I've seen several times in the last few years, just in my town, is we have projects that are good projects, but because we're doing them at such a slow scale, we're paying through the nose for them. If we could do them on a larger scale, and take on 10 miles instead of 2 miles at a time, we could achieve a lot of savings. And ultimately that savings, if you think of it as whether we're federal citizens, state citizens, local citizens, we're all citizens. It's all our tax money, and we should want to achieve those economies. So it's a general comment, but it seems like it's maybe a chance to throw it into the hopper. So thank you for your presentation.
So,
Comment, thanks.
there's just so much I want to say, but I want to say it kind of like in response to what I'm hearing, yeah, just be from perspective, having been on the part of the advisory council for a while, but also by being on the board by virtue of being the chair of this, of the advisory council. So I tell you what, let me just ask David a question. I understand what you say about the cooperation, but given the way our region works, we have this collection of municipalities, and to a certain extent, a town can only do something, if its government, mainly its town meeting, or in the case of a city, its mayor, and city council goes along with it. It does create a big challenge, though, for us kind of doing things, on a grander scale, right?
Yeah, I think it does, and we're never going to be able to force people to do it. But if you can incentivize them,
Right.
The old phrase about money talks does,
Right.
I think, come into play. People are very good at recognizing where is the money, and if they see there's more money to be had by presenting a joint proposal, I think it might actually achieve something.
Right. I see where you're coming from. All right. So, Anna Christina?
Sorry, I have to reach over here to do the mute. Yes, to that point, it could be a double-edged sword, because at my last company, which was a consulting firm, I can tell you that there are high-level planning companies, private firms. There's one out of New York specifically, and they do a lot of work in the tri-state area, making sure that New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut all are, symbiotic. And I'm worried that if we do give over to private firms, we'll lose some control over the smaller voices of like RTAs. So I'm not sure if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but that is the one thing. There are private firms that see that this is one of our weaknesses and they're trying to come in and take over certain things. So that's it.
All right, thank you. Franny?
Yeah, sort of in response to what some people have been saying, sort of about evaluating. I always think that some kind of top-down review, and maybe from the FTA, this would be a useful thing, in looking at everything that's happening and noticing the inequities from there. Like if you see a walking path being developed in one area, looking at the whole area and saying, okay, what are the other places that are similar to this and have similar needs? And are they doing this type of thing? And if not, proposing, the proposals don't have to always come from below, but that it could be sort of designed a little bit more top down based on experience.
Okay. So I'm going to say some things in response to some questions that I've seen. So I think the questions are good. And on the first flyer that we got, or a PDF, there were a couple of questions, and I think they are good to.
Liz.
I'm sorry, was that a question to me or just background sound? Okay, this is background sound. So if you're not talking, I think it'll be helpful to mute. Thanks. And I don't have the flyer pulled up right now, but it was the one that I think Jonathan or maybe Stella sent in. And while we are trying to understand whether the MPO is doing a good job or not, I think this is a good opportunity to find out how the MPO could perhaps do a better job. So a couple of questions I might rephrase is, how can we help you better understand how the planning process works and how to get involved and more involved? And the other one would be, how can we create opportunities or more opportunities for you to participate and be heard? And I think the questions were like, are there opportunities for you to participate and be heard? But with regards to what the answer is, it'd be interesting to see what people are willing to say in this certification process about opportunities to participate. And I think also kind of along those lines, we could, as we reach out to people, just add an additional phrasing to the questions that we're looking at to try to just get more information about what we can do better, as opposed to just whether we're doing a good job or not. I think what's really challenging about the MPO process for non-professionals is that you're doing it on a volunteer basis, and your exposure is coming, like once a month, maybe 2 or 3 times a month. And it just takes a long time, I think, for people to begin to feel comfortable with the material. And in that amount of time, I think a lot of people just lose interest or they move on to other things. So I think 2 things need to be done. I think we just need to try to develop a bigger pool of people who are learning the material, and that's all about outreach. And I certainly have some ideas about how to do it in a more focused way. And I'll just say the idea again, and that is to create kind of a MPO university of sorts. I think one MPO, maybe in the Atlanta area, has something along those lines, and it just be a curriculum that we develop where we're really teaching people about essentially transportation in the region. I mean, and with that, we could try to get some diversity by the folks that we bring into the program. And so essentially you're developing a pipeline of people who could serve on the advisory council and also on the board, maybe through other regions. I mean, I do think what we do with the sub-regions is really good. And I've just started reading the sub-region report booklets that have been updated over the summer. And I think those are really good. And I think that's really our attempt to try to get the municipalities to work together. And so I think that's just going to take a little while to show some fruit, because as I mentioned earlier, we do have the municipalities to their government structures to work through. And it can just be really hard to coordinate all of that because it's got to go through the town meetings. You got to get the funding, sometimes right away. And so I think what either you wait a while to try to pull that all together, or you do what you can with the monies that you have before they go away. And so whether there can be some overarching structure, like MassDOT, that can come in and maybe do some additional coordination. I don't know, but MassDOT is a part of this. It's a big part of this. So maybe we can ask MassDOT to play a bigger role in that part of the process. But along those lines, though, I think we could just do more in terms of supporting the planners being in the various communities, especially the smaller ones, because I think a lot of times they don't even have anything to go to their government structures with, because they just don't have the bandwidth to put anything together. So if we see a gap in that in a region or in a set of municipalities, and we know that they just don't have the technical support, then it'd be good for us to be in a position that we could offer that. So I have a few more things that I could say, but I'm going to stop now and see if anyone else wants to say something. Anna Christina, your hands.
Yeah, I was just going to say, along the lines of what you were saying, and David and Franny, is there any way the MPO could get together with other MPOs and maybe host, and maybe even include New Hampshire and Vermont MPOs, and host like a transportation summit where anyone from the RTACs or anyone who participates in these sort of forums, it could be virtual. It wouldn't have to be at a location per se. And I think that would be really interesting just to hear like what projects are most important in the area that are going on or upcoming, and just maybe have it once a year, like a transportation summit. Does that make sense? I don't think that would cost too much. It would just require organization.
Well, these are all. I don't think our guests are going to tell us what we can and can't do. I think what this process, when we listen to each other say, what we see are shortcomings or things we can do better, is for us to then take those ideas and try to make them happen. And that may be something that we can do as a region. Is just kind of set some time aside where we evaluate ourselves. I think one of the questions was that, is there enough time for feedback on projects that are up for evaluation? The cycle is so tight as it is, and I know that one of the issues I have is that we get comments from the public on our drafts, and sometimes those of us on the board, aren't really seeing those comments, far in advance of our meetings, and it's not clear to me if they're just not available within a day or two of the meeting, or if I'm just failing to see them in time. Because mean, I generally download everything that I see, a day or two before the meeting, but if those comments are there a week before, then that's my bad. But in any case, sometimes the comments are fairly substantial, and they do make you want to go, oh, I want to talk with folks more about this. But at that point, you're like, you're getting ready to approve the tip for it. So it's like, well, we're not going to stop the process now. And so it's a matter of how can we get those comments earlier? And I remember when this came up last time, it was more like, well, these comments had been heard by Matt and others, and to a certain extent addressed. And because my experience is such that I feel that my confidence in staff is correctly placed, I'm not concerned, but part of me also feels that it's on me to then remember those comments and apply them to similar projects or at least, yeah, that's the sense of it, apply them to similar projects. So I've been hearing myself talking for a while. I still have more to say, but I'm gonna stop and see if anyone else has anything they want to say. Okay, then the last thing I'll say is, and if Tegan's on, she might want to like cover ears or be prepared to be frustrated by my desire to see us kind of evaluate the process itself. And I know to a certain extent they think that's what we're doing, but then when I look at when I read briefly the last report about how you Federal Highway and Federal Transportation evaluate us, and I kind of wonder like what are the metrics, and I know that it's a comprehensive continuing and cooperative process, but in order to determine whether we could do better, it's like, well, what are the metrics for determining whether we could do better? Is it that we've cooperated with enough municipalities? Should we be cooperating with more? Are our plans comprehensive enough? How could they be more comprehensive? What would be your way of determining that they could be more comprehensive or continuing? And I feel that can be done. It would be hard, but we look at the selection of projects, and when we had to pick amongst the projects, then you could say, well, there'd be a combination that might be better than another combination, but then how would you make that determination? So that to me is saying, well, how do we evaluate our process beyond this recertification process? That's it. Anna?
Yes, I just to go along with my wishful thinking regarding where money gets programmed. I'd also, along with sustainability, I'd like to see a component of intelligent design be rewarded in the project. Because that's upcoming, and I think if we start doing it now, it won't be so expensive to do it all at once.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Just on my wish list.
No. Yeah, I actually like that one a lot. The sustainability. I think that is a component of some of the criteria. And we could always make it a bigger component.
Yeah, bigger priority, definitely.
Yeah, give it more weighting.
And I think contractors want it.
Yeah.
It's good PR for them. So.
I think I'll add something.
Sure.
Just the different areas that overlap is sort of problematical. I'm thinking about the importance of transportation planning for all the people who don't live in the MBTA region, who live in all the rest of the state. And as the city gets more expensive and people have to move farther out, but then they still have to come in, there's so much interaction between all of them. And I think in some ways, maybe the MBTA and the RTAs have to be treated the same. Not, you know, it can still be based on population. Things can be based on population. It doesn't mean that areas with high density would have to suffer any, but that the attention to the people who live in low density areas, because there's so much travel that goes in between one area to the other. So we all have some of the same needs. And I'm not sure how that fits into TIP and FTA funding, because as I said, there's so many different overlapping areas. But just that issue,
Mhm.
I think, is a challenge.
Well, I think also when it comes to coordinating on that level, and also amongst communities, it might be helpful to work more closely with MAPC, because I think they might have some insights, that not only would help us work with other municipalities, but also help us work, towards more more comprehensive set of goals, like housing, because we all know that the kind of housing you get in a place will depend on the kind of transportation network that exists, and so I know that MAPC is on the board, but I think it might be good if we could have a tighter relationship, with more of the planning folks, at MAPC, especially when it comes to transportation, housing, land development, the things that went into their MetroCom in 2050. Oh, two hands went up. And I ordered John McQueen and then Steve Wallenoff.
Hi, perhaps there might be some wisdom in evaluating whether the geography for the MPO should actually be expanded, just given the realities of just, I think, as Franny was sort of indicating, just the center of gravity, let's say, of housing and commuting and population is changing. And although there'd be regional jealousies, perhaps those could be overcome by having more members of the newer areas included in the former bigger area. Let's say the core Boston area might very well be appropriate to have Worcester in there, because there's a lot of relevance. There's more of a push for interconnectivity between, let's say, the LMA and the Framingham line or the Worcester line into Yawkey Station and into central core Boston. And there's going to be more so because of the affordability, and that's being advertised to people in the core area is move out here and come to Polar Park and drink Polar Seltzer and commute back and forth. So it may be relevant. It may be better for a cohesive effort for planning, let's say, for a person who's living on that fringe area, maybe in Shrewsbury or Worcester, to be having some of their destiny, their commuting destiny or their travel destiny covered under one MPO. Just as a thought that the old borders probably aren't relevant as much anymore. Thank you.
Sure. Steve?
So I wanted to talk about the subject listed here, equity. And I think that's always a problem anywhere. Everyone wants to do something to make things, gain more equity, but it's tough. I think the problem with the MPO is that we have these environmental justice communities. We call them communities, but they're not really communities. They're part of a city or a town. And so the representation is from that city or town. Those people recognize the fact that, yes, they have an environmental justice community within them. But I've never seen any of the representatives on the MPO actually from those environmental justice communities. And so consequently, we don't get any direct representation from those environmental justice communities. So it just happens in all these different cities and towns throughout the region that that's the case. And I have no idea how to do anything about that. But the only time someone from an environmental justice community actually shows up is when they have a project within the area with they're having a problem with, and then they show up. But otherwise, they're not directly represented at the MPO.
Well, we have 7 more minutes for this item on the agenda.
Can I say
Okay.
something real quick? Just
Sure.
to go off of David's point, that's what I was mentioning is, expanding the area, it's having a summit, a yearly summit or something where all the MPOs invite all the RTAs, the MPOs can discuss their big projects, so we know what's going on. Like here, I know right now I'm working on a project that's extending the MBTA Green Line through Lowell up into Manchester, New Hampshire. So I'm like, oh, we're going into New Hampshire. This is going to be a working line. Like, I just feel like the expansion, it would be good. I don't know how to do it other than some sort of summit.
Well, go ahead.
Actually,
Go ahead.
I mean, in a way, the federal government is a summit. I mean, it's like, this is where, the federal government is asking what can be different. And so sort of acting as an ongoing summit could be a way it could be different, I think is what you're saying, in addition to actually having summits.
Maybe I just missed the summit. I'll have to keep my eye out for it.
No, I meant a virtual summit. Yeah, no.
Steve?
Yeah, well, we did have there was a meeting where people from the MPO came up from Miami. And I was not able to attend that. I had a conflict there last minute. And so I don't know how that came out. And I think it'd be nice if we got a report through the MPO on what happened and some of the things that might have been learned, because everyone always seems to ask the question, how do things work at other MPOs, and we never get the answer. So having more meetings with different MPOs, and I don't know how many people attended that, how it went, but I think we need a report on that so the other people who couldn't attend can find out.
I was able to attend half of it in person, and then the other maybe 2/3 of that remaining half virtually. And I'll say one thing that was interesting is that their advisory council is composed of primarily either professionals or elected officials. So just the composition of their advisory council is different. I'm not sure how that works over other advisory councils. In fact, one of the things I really do want to do is reach out to our advisory councils in the state here and other MPOs to see what they're up to. But yeah, I won't say more about the event itself. I'll leave that for Tegan or someone else to report out on. But yeah, I'm trying not to comment on ideas myself now, because it's really for our guests from the feds to listen to us. But I think there's some interesting things coming out of this conversation that we can follow up on ourselves in subsequent meetings. David.
Thank you. Just a quick clarification. I'm not disagreeing with the notion of cooperating with other MPOs, but the point I was trying to make was really talking about the existing member towns within our own existing MPO and encouraging cooperation among that community. And then just a quick aside, several years ago when we were revisiting our bylaws for a comprehensive rewrite, I looked up a lot of the other MPOs that I could find online to see what the equivalent of their advisory councils were, and there's tremendous variety. I mean, and so I wouldn't assume that there is a body or multiple bodies just like ours that we can have a summit with and learn lots from. I mean, yes, there's always more to learn, but the structures of these the way that MPOs get their public participation really runs quite a gamut. And there isn't necessarily the MPO with an advisory council just like ours at every MPO you turn. They often operate in very different ways.
Thanks, David. Christina?
No, just to follow up on what David was saying. I think I understand what he's saying, and I think it's true. I think what I'm getting out of a lot of this in general is basically, how do you plan if you don't know what the left hand is doing? So I'm just stumped by this fundamental question. That's why I'm saying, like, I feel like I need to hear what other things are being planned in order to have an opinion on, you know, whether I really think this is a good idea or not.
No, I see where you're getting at. And I just want to make it clear, we can go a little long if we want. Steve, I'm going to take you back. I just want to make it clear to folks who aren't a member of the advisory council that you can speak at this. I mean, I assume you know that, and that's why you're here. Maybe that you just want to listen, but please raise your hand if you want to speak. And if you've been holding off, you know, if you've been wishing that you could speak, we'll make more time for you to speak. You know, so Steve?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that I kind of like the composition of our MPO because it's not all elected public officials. We have a lot of town planners. We have some, you know, like town officials, select board members, or lesser members like planning board members. And we just have some citizens who are just volunteering and so it's a nice variety. It's nice to have that. And that's pretty much the composition of our MPO, and that's the way it's been over the years. And I think that's having that different levels of people there has worked very well.
Yeah, but Steve, I was actually commenting on the advisory councils, you know, in the Miami-Dade area. You know, is the advisory council that was pretty much, you know, elected officials, you know,
Yeah,
or
so
professionals.
our advisory council tends to be fewer officials and more just volunteer people at different levels. We have a pretty good variety, but you know, sometimes we have people here and then they go on to, guess what? They go on, they start off as a volunteer, they go on and end up being a select board member.
Yeah.
As I say, do I hear that?
It's like a springboard. It's a
Yeah.
springboard to, I don't know if it's greater things, but certainly things that take more of your time.
Yeah, but it's nice to have that variety, and
Yeah.
you know, Franny was the same way. Franny was started out and then she ended up being a select board member. So
Yeah. Yeah, you're up, Steve. You know, so I see Leah's hands up.
Yeah, I appreciate this conversation. So thank you very much for everyone's thoughts. I guess I just kind of wanted to follow up on this sort of thinking about different advisory councils. I'd like to hear, particularly from those of you who are on the advisory council, what do you see as RTAC's role in the planning process?
Yeah.
Franny, I saw you. You just happen to be on this window that I can see, so I saw your hand go up.
Well, I'm going to take the cynical point of view. Members of it seem to come and go when we are. The problem of being hybrid is we've lost some of the people that used to come all the time. There was a blind member and some other members, or I don't know how you define. First of all, membership was never clearly defined. You know, I didn't know who was on the outside of the table, who was at the table, why, and the the combination of different communities or organizations always seem to be roving. And if somebody asked me, what is this RTAC you're on? I would say we advise the MPO. But in my mind is the question of what are the other groups that advise the MPO? I don't even know where we fit in the whole environment. And our chair is a member of the MPO, so they take our vote, but that feels very unpowerful. It's sort of analogous to I've chaired our Transportation Advisory Committee in our town. And oftentimes it's not really clear how much power we have. You know, we advise the select board. But so my cynical answer is I don't really know exactly what our role is and how effective it is. One way it's been very effective, I think, has been by educating our membership and whoever attends. We've had such great presentations by members of the MPO staff and also other related groups. And that's been a major value for me. And I'm assuming for others. But as to our role and makeup, it's a little hazy for me.
So that's Franny responding to that. Someone gonna make me call their names to answer the question? I can call your name. I can't make you talk though. So because of that, you know, especially in this virtual realm, which is a plus, right? You know, David, you want to say something about that?
Sure. Well, my take on it, I've tried to answer that question a number of times over the years, and I guess I'm always a little humble about it because I think basically we're in a less than perfect system, and we may not achieve exactly the goals we set for ourselves, but I think ideally what we do is we provide an opportunity for more players to participate in the MPO process than otherwise would, because there's only so many seats around the table at the MPO meetings, and we essentially act as a funnel through our chair to get more voices represented. Sometimes there are hot button issues that have come to the fore, and we've become advocates for certain areas. I mean, I'm thinking back when I first started involved in this, there was still a very vibrant legacy of advocacy for freight planning, and that was a thing. It was a thing we really did, and not a lot of other people were doing. I think that there are times when it doesn't really work particularly well. I mean, it's always available, and that's the crucial. But I'd say I have lingering concerns, regular concerns, ongoing concerns about our membership being kind of a static group. We haven't expanded in the number of towns that that are regular members and or groups in a substantial way in a while, and I think that's kind of concerning. But I guess I'd say our primary functional role is to advise the MPO on an annual basis on the TIP and the UPWP, give them like this is our collective opinion on what you've thrown out for consideration.
And I see it as more meaningful input. And I think, Franny, that's where the education comes into play, because the more you understand about the way, you know, the transportation system works, I mean, both from a technological point of view, but also policy-wise, I mean, then when you are asked for input, be it through MPO opportunities or even outside MPO opportunities, I mean, you are in a better position to do so, because if you don't know the answer, then perhaps you know the questions to ask. I mean, I find a lot of the learning process is about it's about getting the confidence to even know what questions to ask, because when you first start out, you don't even know what you don't know, and you can't even phrase a question. There comes a point where you know the question to ask, and that's when the real learning starts. So I just see it as our role to give meaningful input, and as with anything, pretty much get out of it what you put into it, and in the case of our representation on the board, I mean, well, I dare say that sometimes I ask, a lot of questions, and they get input, that is hopefully representative of what folks here are thinking, or at least want to ask. Oh, well, one other thing I'll add to, and I think this is something I really want to try to work on, and I think, and I made it clear in a couple of meetings, and that is that according to the MOU, the advisory council is the entity that is most responsible for outreach. So in the case of the public participation plan, to the extent there are any revisions of that, that should come to the advisory council first before going to the board, because we're supposed to be the ones that are responsible for that. And so any development of those plans should really work through the advisory council first, and then to the board, and not come to the board first, and then I report back to the advisory council what has been developed as a public participation plan. That sounds pretty much on. Alrighty. So I'm going to ask our guests if there's anything else they want to say in closing, and move along with the rest of the agenda.
I would ask if Stella can go to the last slide that we had that has our contact information. And again, I think this slide deck will be available for folks, but again, certainly invited to follow up with any thoughts. That's by October 14th.
Great, thank you, Franny.
Yeah, I would love to know your observations after this from what you heard, and also what other people, I'm always aware of my lack of knowledge, and if other people hear me describing RTAC in a way that is totally off, I would love to hear someone say, no, I think it's more like this, or it's supposed to be like this. I'd really would welcome sort of an interchange, and from both the staff here and from the FDA funders.
Okay. I have some ideas about how we can go about helping with that, Franny. That's going to come up on our next item on our agenda. So thank you, Leah and Cassie. And I guess I'll probably see you at a board meeting, in a couple of weeks, and so you know how to reach me, and if you want to do any additional follow-up, just reach out to me or Tegan, or anyone else associated with the NPO. David? Oh, that's a thumbs up. Okay. I see some thumbs up.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for the time today. Really appreciate it. Again, appreciate the discussion. This will be summarized and included in the report, and I think we have a lot to think about, Lee and I, and maybe some recommendations even will come out of this. So appreciate the discussion and for giving us time on today's agenda.
You're welcome. Take care. So
Thank you.
So yeah, so elections, and so we will do our election at the November meeting, and between now and our October meeting, we need to pull together an election committee, to get nominees, and we've made it clear that Scott's not going to be running again for vice chair, so we definitely need to find a vice chair. a nominee or two or more for that. I have indicated my willingness means and my desire to do this and for one more year. And it's not because I'm not limited to 1 year because I anticipate not enjoying it. I just think it's good to let go, and for you to bring in someone new. And I think I like the idea of going through a long range planning cycle, and that will coincide with the end of this current planning cycle for the long range education plan. So, and as I think I said the last meeting, it'd be good, I think, if the vice chair were a person that would want to go on and be chair. But I don't want that to scare anyone off from wanting to serve as vice chair. Franny, So with that, can we pull together an election committee? And just keep in mind that being on the election committee does not preclude you from being nominated. And also, as I said, if someone wants to be chair next year, I'm not going to run against you. So just because I express a desire to do it one more year, if someone decides I really would like to do it this coming November, I'm not going to compete against you. So David.
Len, I'm not trying to make trouble here, but I just want to point out the bylaws do say that our elections will be held in October with their terms beginning in November. So if we can't pull that off, then we might want to just acknowledge we're not going to pull that off and openly.
Okay, I'm sorry. I guess I lost track. For some reason, I thought the elections were in November. They've been in October, huh? All right,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No problem.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's a
Well,
reason.
I guess if you need to first start with forming a election committee, I'll sit on that with you.
I'm sorry about that. Well, I don't think I can be on the election committee as the chair. So well, I tell you what, David. Let's just acknowledge that we are not going to meet that timeline this cycle, and make sure next cycle that we are on that timeline. Unless people think that they can pull off the pulling together the election committee, get the nominee, get their statements out, and us do the election in November.
I'm willing to work with Anna Christina on just looking around and nominating, being on the nominating.
All right.
But I would ask all of you to look inside you and see if you're ready to chair or vice chair.
Okay. So we have two, and two does make a committee. It'd be good if we get a third. So Santa Cristina and Franny, do you think you can pull this off so that we can do the election in October?
I'm willing to meet. Do you want to, or even if it's just, I'll Zoom you.
Yeah, we're not going to spend weeks doing this anyway, so we may as well do it. But I do have a daughter getting married October 8th, so I don't want to commit to too much before then. But as I said, I don't think we'll put in that much time. So whether we do it now or the end of October, it doesn't matter. So why don't we see if we can find people? But again, I ask everybody to feed us names or your own names. Please.
Okay. And I just think normally there are statements that go out. I just think it's probably going to be hard to pull it off.
When do they go out? How long before?
Usually a couple of weeks before the election. So give it a try. And I tell you what, why don't we touch base in a couple of weeks and see where you are, and then I'll determine what we do in October.
Great, and thank you, David, for sharing the
Sure, and I'm sure Stella probably has those, or if she doesn't, let me know, Stella, and I'll make sure you have, I have back from when I last touched them. I don't think they've been touched since, but
Yeah, thank you for flagging that, David, and my apologies for not bringing that up sooner. I didn't notice the dates, but yeah, I'm just happy to provide whatever logistical support needed
Okay.
on the staff side too for this.
another thing to just notice in there is that we have this provision that's historical that says, when available, the committee will be chaired by the last, the retired chair of the advisory council. Well, Tegan is that person right now. I don't think she's probably eager to particularly chair that thing. And there are other past chairs who participate in this group. I'm one of them, and I have no desire to chair that again. I've done that a few times, and I think Steve has had his share of it. It's sort of like,
Count me out on that one too.
yeah, it's a provision that really doesn't really work in practice in recent years, because either if you stick around long enough, you get stuck with doing it too many times, and if you don't stick around, you're not available. So that language can be kind of, I think we can all rely on the part where it says if available, and the answer is not available. So
Well, I would never presume to speak for Tegan. So I wouldn't just like count Tegan out on this. It's like, who knows? Maybe, yeah. So
I think the intent is that it's a member of RTAC, right? And I am no longer, sadly, I am no longer a member of RTAC in my current role. So I think it would not quite fit the intent of the bylaws.
you're like the
Much to my chagrin.
you're like the superset. It's like, okay, all right. Well, be that way. Thank you. Thanks for chiming in.
So we're 1 month behind. So that means the October meeting, they need to have the report from the nominating committee and actually do the nominations. And then the election would be in November. Just everything 1 month late.
Yeah, and we'll make sure to correct things for the following year. Sorry about that.
Why don't we just move? Well, could we just make a motion to delay it by 1 month?
Send it. Yes.
Excellent.
Yeah, we can do that. Would that be okay, David?
I think it's fine. I think as long as we're sort of open about it.
Yeah.
I'm not having a problem as long as,
Yeah.
which we've already been. So, but if you want to get it on the record it's probably a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Thank
I move that we move up the nominations to October and the elections to November.
Push them back.
I'll second.
Okay,
All right.
And
Yes.
term starting December.
All right. And so, well, since this is, one of those, I think, votes where let's just go down the line. Although I think, the main board now is just kind of doing them. It's not going down the line. The full board. So I tell you what, all in favor, say aye.
All right.
Aye.
Any objections?
I want to make a clarification.
Yes.
I think the term that we vote for whenever we get there we should dovetail back and get on track again, rather than pushing everything out because we don't want to have the bylaws be out of sync. So whenever we get to a vote and we put new people in, let's have their terms end when they should end.
Oh yeah. No. I agree with that. Regardless of where I am in the process. So all right. So that's what we'll do. And so that's that item on the agenda. And the chair's report, it is primarily, we worked on getting out the final version of the UPWP, and there's the state's Streets for All initiative. And we had folks talk with us about that. Otherwise, there's been nothing very compelling. In fact, I think our last two meetings have been very short, actually. So it's not that I'm forgetting. It's really been that it's been a little bit of a light summer, and so as a result, there's a light chair's report. And so next we have the approval of the April 13th, 22 meeting minutes.
Move to approve.
On a motion by Franny,
Second,
a second by John. And all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any, any opposed? And I forgot to do this last time. Any abstains?
I'm gonna abstain.
Okay, all right, so that takes care of that. So old business, new business.
Do we have a quorum? What is a quorum?
For all practical purposes, yes. And
I think it's
Yeah.
5 voting members, right? Is that the quorum?
No, it's a sliding scale that has to do with how often people have been attending. They retain their voting rights if they keep attending. So it's sort of a number that only the likes of Stella can figure out for us with data. But it was,
I will say, yes, it's been one of my projects since I started facilitating this and working with you all. So I am close to having a full list of, I'll make sure that that happens before the elections.
but when we revised the formulation, we did it in a way that made it a lot easier to meet quorum. Whether we are meeting it at this moment, I can't tell you, but because you have to look back on but it connects to whether you still have your voting rights and you have them by showing up. So there are a lot of people who are technically, who are on the rolls as voting members, but they've kind of lost their voting status by not showing up for the last couple of years.
Can we ask the elections committee for a copy of that list, Stella?
Yeah, absolutely. I will try to get that to you as soon as possible.
Thanks. Those are the kind of questions that a vice chair would ask, Franny. Great.
So I actually just wanted to say something real quick. So I don't know if I don't think we've mentioned this, but I just wanted to tell everyone here that like the reason I'm not running again is not because I don't enjoy the role or anything like that. It's I moved last year and I'm based out of Portland, Maine now. And although I still technically work out of Boston, I work from home for all intents and purposes. And I just think somebody that has their finger on the pulse a little more, I try to keep up, but I just wanted to mention my reasons. Maybe I'll still attend as just an interested party, but I know I'm not gone yet, but I just wanted to say that.
Thanks.
Thank you for all of the years you put in, Scott.
Yeah, thank you.
And I hope
Thank-
to see you continuing.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy seeing you also. I'm sure I'll show up at least sometimes.
Good.
Are we meeting again in person at any time in the near future?
Probably. I mean, I get down there sometimes. I just, like I said, it's like maybe once or twice a month. And lately I've been traveling more in my role for the National Rural Transit Assistance Program. And that makes it difficult for me to get down there even sometimes. And anyway, I think it's time for somebody that's actually local. I was local for 15 years and I still feel like I am in some ways, but
who knows? If we follow John McQueen's lead, the takeover of the MPOs isn't going to stop at the Massachusetts border. We'll reach into Maine and grab.
well, I was one of those people that were talking about it that kind of got, I don't know, I guess I'd say I got priced out, where I was just like, I like living in Cambridge, Somerville, Boston, but that's not realistic. I want to buy a house.
Yeah, no, actually, that's why I bought my house in Lowell, because at the time in 2006, I was priced out of Cambridge as well. So that's why we need to expand the MPO.
Need to get MAPC on the job.
All right, folks. Well, it's been a fun meeting, next month, I think we're going to work on the Route 9 corridor study and see what we can do in terms of thinking ideas, and along the lines of how could the advisory council maybe help in getting some real projects out of that, by helping our members either work with the communities to come up with plans or whatever. Just use it, these corridor studies are really good studies. I mean, they're long, there's a lot to them. And so if you actually, now I'm thinking about it, maybe I should like get someone to send the link into that corridor study, or I can send the link to folks and send it around to you so you can start reading it before, like long before the meeting. So that's the plan at this point. And actually, I guess maybe I'm a little bit ahead of myself, because I think actually the next meeting, correct me, Stella, we're going to have Scott, I'm blanking on her first name, and talk with us about the vision. So Michelle Scott, talk with us about the vision regarding the LRTP, right? So I think Stella's going, well, you're the chair.
I think Stella just fell off of the meeting. Yeah, but I believe the next meeting is to talk about the LRTP with Michelle Scott.
Yeah. And so in which case we'll do the Route 9 in the following months. So, okay. So can we get a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn. I'll adjourn.
Second.
All right. So as they do the board meetings, we adjourn.
Thank you, MPO staff.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good to see you all.